Okay, so we're going to pick up with number 8. So we're still working on 4.8. And let's start off with number 8. Oops, rate number 8. Okay, so number 8, we have 3 over 8 x equals negative 2 over 24. If we take the reciprocal, since this is attached by multiplication, if we take it the reciprocal, which is 8 over 3, and multiply it, this will all divide out to ones. And what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So I'm going to rewrite it as x equals, and I have a negative 2 times 8 all over, and then this 24, I'm going to write that as 8 times 3. I'm going to factor it out. And this is 8 times 3, and then don't forget the times 3. Don't forget this right here. All right, so now when I start dividing out, that divides out to ones. And then if you look at the top, we have a negative 2 remaining in your numerator, and the denominator, it's 3 times 3, which is 9, and that's your final answer. Okay, now moving on to number 9. Number 9, we have a k over 2 minus k equals 1. Now the goal is to get it two like fractions so we can go ahead and subtract those. So just know, I'm going to write this over to the side. K over 2, remember 1 times k equals k. So this here, we know there's a 1 there. We just eliminate it. It's just understood. So we can rewrite this as 1/2 k. All right. Now this k, that's the same thing again. It's 1 times k. Now 1 can also be expressed as a fraction. Remember, as long as the numerator and the denominator is the same, that's equivalent to 1. So we would want to select 2 because that's in our denominator, and we want to make sure that we have like fractions so we can subtract those out. So I would rewrite this one as 2 over 2k. All right, so let's go ahead and take these and bring them over into our equation. So if I have 1/2 k subtracted by 2 over 2k, that's equal to 1. You could see now on this left side, we have like fractions. So I'm just going to rewrite that as one fraction. So I have 1 minus 2 all over 2k. It's still equal to 1. And then again, the rule is change this to a plus sign, make that the opposite sign. We're going to subtract, take the sign of the larger number. So that's negative 1/2 over k is equal to 1. Now we're going to multiply by that reciprocal, but make sure it's a negative 2 over 1. The reason why you want the reciprocal, because a negative times a negative will give us a positive answer, and that's our ultimate goal. So we know these divide out to ones. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. On the other side would be a negative 2 over 1. And remember, anytime we have anything, a whole number, a fraction that's expressed with a number, to express a whole number, it's written like this as a fraction. You have the number over top of 1. So you can see this fraction here, negative 2 over 1, is the whole number, negative 2. Sorry about that. So our final answer here would be negative 2, because 1 times negative 2 would give us a result of negative 2. All right, let's move over to number 10. Now, at number 10, we have a fraction of 1/3. So that's number 10. 1/3, and we're going to subtract it by 7 over 2, and that's equal to x over 6. All right, so you can see we have to do some work. These are not like fractions, so we have to come up with our lowest common denominator. And hopefully you're okay with this process at this point. It's 6. To come up with our equivalent of fractions, I'm going to set them up. And it's 7 over 2 is equal to 6. And then I start doing the multiplying process. 3 times 2 is 6, so 3 times 7 is 21. 2 times 3 is 6, so 2 times 1 is 2. There's our equivalent fractions. I'm going to go over here and write them out. So we have 2 over 6, and that's subtracted by 21 over 6 equals to x over 6. Okay, now I'm going to just write it as one fraction, 21 over, or 2 minus 21 over 6, and just rewriting the right side. Remember the rule is change that to a plus, make this the opposite, subtract, take the sign of the larger number, which is negative 19 over 6, equals x over 6. All right, so now we're just going to, now we have that simplified on the left side. Now we can focus on getting a 6 off of that x. So we can go ahead and multiply it by its reciprocal. Remember, x over 6 is the same thing as 1/6x. So the reciprocal would be 6 over 1. These divide out to 1. And then what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So that would be 6 over 1. Multiply this side. But you can immediately see these divide out to 1. So our answer here would be negative 19 equals x. And that's your final answer. All right, let's move over to number 11. So if I have 9 over 2 minus k over 9 equals 5 over 18. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to get this fraction here and move it over to this side. So we would have to subtract it out. So what we do to one side, we must do to the other, just like that. So I'm going to rewrite it as negative k over 9 equals, and then we have 5 over 18, and then it's minus 9 over 2 on this side now. So the same thing, we got to come up with our lowest common denominator. So for this one, the lowest common denominator is 18. And if I set up my fractions to get my equivalents, we just know that 18 is the lowest common denominator. And we start multiplying it out. We know that we have 9 times 2 is 18, so 9 times 9 is 81. 1 times 18 is 18, so 1 times 5 is 5. Now we have our equivalents. I'm going to write them over here. So negative k, let me start with that, k over 9 is equal to, and then we have 5 over 18 subtracted by, and then we have 81 over 18. Rewrite that as one fraction, which is 5 minus 81 over 18. Apply the integer rules, change that to a plus, make that the opposite sign. So now we know we have a negative k over 9 on this side, not doing anything on that left side yet. And then over here on the right, we subtract it out and take the sign of the larger number. We end up with negative 76 over 18. All right, now we can focus on getting the 9 off of that k. So we're going to go ahead and multiply it by its reciprocal, which is 9 over 1. And we see these 9s divide out to 1, but I have a negative k. So it's important that I multiply it by negative 9 over 1. Because remember, a negative times a negative will give us that positive answer. So what you do to one side, you must do to the other. Now I'm going to go ahead and write, let me just scroll this up. So I have negative k, no longer negative k, I'm sorry. The two negatives now make this k a positive. And that's equal to, and I'm just going to write this as one fraction, which is negative 76 times 9, all over 18 times 1. As you can see, we can go ahead and get a 9 out of this 18, so 9 times 2. So let me just rewrite that. So it would be 9 times 2 times 1. You can see the 9s reduce out to 1. So now we have, let me just scroll this up, because we're going to do some reducing. Now we have k equals negative 76, but if I have a 2 on the bottom, I know 76, 38, and don't forget the negative sign, times 2 gives me 76, all over top of 2 times 1. I know these divide out to 1, so you can see here my final answer is k equals negative 38. Oops, let me write. Negative 38. Sorry, I don't know why it keeps doing that. Negative 38. I can't seem to get it. There it is. I'm sorry. All right, let's move on to number 12. So I have 2 more problems to show you. So number 12, we have a negative m minus 3m equals 2 over 3. Now, these on the left side, you can combine them because that's the same thing as being a negative 1m. So that would be a negative 1 minus 3. Change the sign, make this the opposite. So you can see that our answer would be, add them up, keep the sign. So we have a negative 4m. So let me make sure I do that correctly. So negative 4m is equal to 2 over 3. So we just combined those like terms on the left side. All right, so let me just make sure I write that. So plus and make that a minus. Now what we need to do is get the 4 off the m. We could easily just divide it out by a negative 4. Or you could think of it as, multiplying it by the reciprocal, which is 1 over 4. However you want to think of it. So if we use this approach by the reciprocal, we know that these divide out to 1, but make sure, since there's a negative 4, make sure that this is a negative also. So when we multiply on this side, we'll be multiplying by a negative 1 over 4. On this side, we end up with m, and on the opposite side, we have a negative 2 times, we have a 2 times a negative 1 in the numerator, and the denominator, we have 3 times, and I'll factor out that 4 and write 2 times 2. We have some 2's that divide out, and our final answer is negative 1 over top of 6. All right, let's go to this final one, number 13. Number 13 is a little more complicated. Now, number 13, we have y over 3 plus 2 equals y over 2 plus 5. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm probably going to move this over to this side of the equation. So I would subtract it from this side, so I have to subtract it from that side. So I'm going to rewrite as y over 3 equals, and then y over 2 plus 5, and then it would be minus 2. So we can clearly see that that answer would be 3, so it would be plus 3. So I'm just going to erase that and write it here. All right, now that we have that simplified, now we need to make sure that we get the y's on one side of the equation. So this one, I'm going to go ahead and subtract it out. So that way it zeroes out. And let me rewrite it. So we have y over 3 minus the y over 2, because again, we're subtracting it out from this side to get it to zero out, equals 3. Now you can see we have to come up with a lowest common denominator, which is 6. Hopefully you can see that. And let's come up with our equivalent of fractions for those. So we have y over 3, and then we have y over 2 is equal to 6. Now if we multiply it out, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times y is 3y, 2 times 3 is 6, and then 2 times y is 2y. So now we have our equivalent fractions. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite those. So I have 2y on this side. So I have 2y over 6, and I'm subtracting it by 3y over 6 is equal to 3. Now I can combine those like terms. So I'm going to rewrite it as 2y minus 3y over 6 is equal to 3. We know to change this to a plus, make that, change that to a plus, make this the opposite sign. We're going to subtract, take the sign of the larger number, which is a negative 1y over 6, and that's equal to 3. All right, now that we're at this point, we're almost done. We're going to go ahead on this side and we're going to multiply it with a negative reciprocal fraction. So that way we end up with a positive answer, and these all divide out to 1s. And then we're going to multiply that same fraction to the opposite side. And so y is equal to, and that would be a negative 18. And that's because